old big corporations, they can always be relied on to wear the appropriate badge that we need to be seen and worn at the appropriate time. As long as we get those badges on at the right time, everything will be okay for everyone. White, black, trans, cis, straight, whatever way you identify. As long as corporations wear badges, everything's going to be okay, right? Hello there, you 5.7 million awakening wonders. Thank you for joining us on this great expedition towards truth. Yes, there will be pitfalls and challenges along the way, but we will remain bold. If you ain't turned on the notification bell yet, go on, turn it on right now. Press it, press that notification bell. Have you pressed it yet? Have you pressed it yet? Press it now, go on. And subscribe to this channel. We need every single one of you if we're to change the world in a meaningful way, particularly as we face ersatz and phatic imitative attempts to nullify and dumb us down. Oh, corporations. Is there a single subject they won't wear a badge for and then not actually do anything about? No, there isn't. Because wearing a badge for something is not the same as actually changing the world. We spoke to Democratic Party insider David Sirota, who actually wrote speeches for Bernie Sanders in his near-successful campaign to become the Democratic Party presidential candidate, which was stymied, nullified and brought down for a number of reasons. And interestingly, in this moment, David Sirota, whose site lever.com, there's a link to in the description, he does a great free newsletter, you'll love it. He explains here how when Bernie Sanders was talking about various universal ideas about how there should be welfare for people, how people should be helped, how people have basic rights, he was attacked from within his own party for not bowing around certain identity politics issues. Now, both David Sirota and myself make very clear that identity politics issues are important, that every single human being has the right to be who they are. That's enshrined in the American Constitution. But are those issues being used to mask and deflect corporate irresponsibility and a marauding pursuit of profit from corporations who don't give a shit about American people who identify in a multitude of ways? Stay to the end of this video and let me know in the comments what you think of this conversation. I think it's very revelatory about the true nature of US politics.
But this is what interests me most. This is what I think is important. You mentioned before that it's difficult to have a climate change policy without a counter hegemony to the current ineffective hegemony. But we must acknowledge that the current hegemony is utterly ineffective already, where there is much centralized corporate power, much centralized state power, no will to offer ecological climate change, and a broad sense among many of the kind of people that we have to start engaging and reaching that these arguments are spurious and unnecessary and they don't reach them. And I think that one of the things the left have to achieve mastery of is that we must be responsible for making our arguments appealing. To paraphrase Tony Blair, who I broadly speaking despised, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, tough on Trump, tough on the causes of Trump, tough on Brexit, tough on the causes of Brexit. We have to recognise how have we got here. And one of the things I'm always suspicious of diagnosis that posit the culpability at the level of ordinary individuals that, in my opinion, have limited power in their life, whether that's an immigrant class or blue collar or even middle class Trump voters. How much power do they individually, or perhaps collectively, one can argue they have some power, but that power, I would argue, and I feel like it's an argument that you've made better than almost anybody, that power pales when compared to corporate power and how that corporate power dovetails with the policymakers in the instance of your country in Washington, but on a global stage with non-elected government bodies that are the IMF, WHO, WF, etc. Varying degrees of power. And I feel that until we have a inverted commas left-wing political movement that's willing to do what FDR did and say we are going to cut these motherfuckers off at the knee because this is what you vote for us. This is what happens tomorrow. Your family gets this. Your family gets that. We shut down Big Pharma. We shut down. Oh my God! Suddenly, they can't come at them there. Because I heard when Matt Taibbi came on, he was talking about Trump in the primaries, talking about, when he was up against Jeb Bush. And he's going, you think this guy's going to do anything? He's campaign managers from Johnson & Johnson. Nothing. You think he's going to regulate your pharma prices? Trump had this sort of plane of rhetorical advantage because of the inefficiency of the Democrat Party, which we've covered in considerable depth over the course of this conversation. And what I feel like I want to embrace, and I feel that what Bernie Sanders was on the precipice of realising, and what Jeremy Corbyn for a while did in our country was to galvanize, like, the most working people, I don't think they care more about cultural issues around bigotry and prejudice when it comes to it than they do about just being left alone to live their own lives. I think people, yeah, of course, people have to progress and understand there's new forms of identity. All those things are really, really important. I'm not being dismissive about them, except as to how, in my opinion, they're not as important as the economic arguments that might meaningfully change the life for a significant number of people in your country and mine. And I think part of our obligation is to reach them as communicators, and not to complain that they don't understand things how we want them to, but to sort of see what's been effective. And it seems to me that that's part of what FDR did and part of what you're advocating for now.
I 100% agree. You cannot blame regular people, if you will, for what's going on. And I think that, you know, not to tout our movie too much, but I think what our movie said, if you look at the subtext of our movie, Don't Look Up, you'll notice that we're not making fun of or blaming the average rank and file person in that movie. That what we are showing, what we are satirizing is the manipulation of rank and file people, the abuse of rank and file people by institutions and people at the top. And I think that you're right, that Bernie Sanders' appeal, as an example, was an appeal of, I am authentically speaking to the working class. Now, I think there was something that came up that was very, very disturbing in that campaign that I've mentioned only a couple times before. But if folks remember some of the details of that campaign, there was this criticism of Bernie Sanders. And look, I'm not here to just, defend Bernie Sanders, say he's perfect and the like. I was his speechwriter, but he and I, we've gone back and forth, and so I'm not here to just say we ran a perfect campaign. But what I can say is this: there was a moment in the campaign where Bernie Sanders was being criticized for the argument was he was putting forward universalist ideas on universalist economic and environmental ideas, and that universalism, the implication was that universalism was somehow undermined or was offensive to the idea of identity. That was it was downplaying race, it was downplaying gender in favor of class. That was the argument. And here is my take on that, which is to say, what are we focused on? Are we focused on rhetoric, or are we focused on outcomes? Yeah. Because if we're focused on outcomes, various universalist policies, Medicare for all is a good example, disproportionately benefit people of color because of the iniquities in our current economic system. My point being that what we have seen is the weaponization of identity against universalism in the economic sphere. And that is both a problem and it's inaccurate. It's not like there's race and gender and then there's economics. They're all intertwined. And I think that Bernie Sanders was putting forward the same ideals as Martin Luther King. I mean, Martin Luther King, if you look at all of Martin Luther King's rhetoric, it was all about universalism. It was all about, we are in this together. And I think, to go back to what we started talking about at the beginning of this conversation, the weaponization of our differences, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't honor our diversity and honor our differences. But when the diversity and the differences are weaponized against a universal agenda that lifts everybody up, that becomes the impediment to actually doing what needs to be done. And I think it's fair to ask politicians like Bernie Sanders to, and I don't think he ever did this, but I think it's fair to ask any politician, don't pretend race and gender and sexual orientation and the like don't exist. It is unacceptable to pretend that we live in a so-called colorblind society. That is horseshit. Okay, but it's also fair to say, don't use identity differences as a weapon against universalist policies. And I think why is identity used as a weapon against universalist policies? The answer is because that serves the corporate master. I go back to this idea that J.P. Morgan, Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, they are not offended by a debate over identity and culture. In fact, that's why you see them leaning in. right? It's in my view, it's not authentic. When you see,
Yeah.
a Wall Street bank wave a pride flag, it's not because they love basic civil rights. It's motivated by the fact that it doesn't ask them to sacrifice one thing on the economy, and it serves as a distraction for the popular anger at them for instance, foreclosing on 10 million people back in the financial crisis. And repeat that ad nauseum. So I think we are now in a situation where, but the problem is that, to be honest with you, making this argument is dangerous for a politician, because a politician can then be accused of being, you're being insensitive to racial differences or racism and bigotry. And I want to be clear, like, I'm here to tell you, like, racism, bigotry, and all of those isms are very real and very bad in the United States. But it's a problem when identity can be weaponized against a unifying economic agenda.
And how are we to create a general unity between ordinary people, diverse in individual identity, beyond the monikers and markers that are currently culturally apposite, diverse in 1,000 different ways, all of them beautiful, all of them necessarily included in any kind of society worthy of the name united, without at some point saying there are powerful economic arguments that need to be made. It feels to me, in a kind of don't look up way, in fact, that there is an invisible ideology that is never addressed. I mean, of course, it's been addressed throughout this conversation, but we don't, when we talk about a fundamentalist ideology, for example, we don't acknowledge we already live within one. That our sport, our music, our entertainment, our fashion, every single facet of culture science has to be pushed down that funnel. If, as an inadvertent consequence, an inadvertent side effect of the practices of big pharma, i.e. the pursuit of profit, some good medicines are released, well, that's great. But they ain't going to carry out those processes if it doesn't lead to profit. They simply will not do it. And I think it banalizes our culture. It creates that infantilized culture that you just referred to. And that kind of debate, I agree with you 100%. That, I don't think they care, like these new practices where there are awards and rewards given to corporations if they tick certain boxes around ecological responsibility. I don't think they care about that. I don't think they have the time or the practice or the ideology or the sort of corporate template to care about that, in the same way that I don't think they, when it comes to the crunch, care about people's identity, the bigotry or prejudice they may have faced, and the challenges that people that are not from a dominated culture, whether that's in China or America, might face from being excluded or even not, easily identifiable participants in that culture. I think all they care about is the pursuit of their invisible ideology that hardly needs to be reiterated and stated. Now, the big challenge we have is you can't challenge that hegemony without a counter hegemony, without the same stroke of a pen that meant Obama would offer quantitative easing to Wall Street in 2008 could have meant that ordinary people's lives could be affected and impacted and awed. And that kind of political will can't exist unless there's some kind of national unity, unless people are willing, on both sides to go, I don't really care about you, you do what you want to do, I'll celebrate you, that's all cool. This is the Goliath, this is the giant, this is what needs to be challenged.
Well, did you enjoy that conversation? Do you feel a little bit wiser, a little bit smarter? We'll put that whole conversation up on YouTube. Let me know in the comments what you thought about it. Give it a thumbs up, turn on the notification bell. Please sign up to my mailing list. We're doing all sorts of exciting stuff, and it's vital that you and me stay directly in contact. We're getting deeper into subjects, we're getting into some crazy territory that you're going to love. Also, if you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these two, but more important than any of that, please stay free.